We're going to change the pace a little bit, talk about some consumer litigation, I guess this would fall into. Troy Bauk
Yeah, Troy Bauk with Love and Papantonio
is joining me. And Troy, you're working on a case, and this is a little bit of, I should just, tell our audience, there's a lot of, we're dancing around here a little bit in terms of going from topic to topic. This one not quite as dramatic in some respects, but it is more aligned, I think more typical of what we see in cases that we're talking about at this conference, dealing with really what I think probably constitutes corporate malfeasance to some degree.
Yeah, that's right, Sam.
Tell me, this is a case about 3M earplugs.
Correct. Yeah, 3M. Basically, the case originated when a company called Moldex out of California brought a key tam action, and a key tam action is like a whistleblower suit against 3M. And in the
key tam, just to be clear, is specifically deals with fraud that has been committed against the U.S. government. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so there is, and just explain to us, because there's actually sort of, I guess private whistleblowers are incentivized to blow the whistle on private entities that are defrauding the U.S. government, and they get a portion of the recovery. Is that?
That's correct. Okay. That is correct, Sam. And in this case, the company that actually was a competitor to 3M discovered some evidence that 3M had allegedly, and their predecessor, Aero Technologies, had falsified some of the original testing of the Combat Arms version 2 earplugs that they were selling to the U.S. military. And so they took that information, filed a key tam suit. And
now, how does a competitor find out that their competitor basically committed fraud in terms of testing these things? And
well, that's a really interesting story, Sam, because in this case, 3M is quite litigious, and they want to protect their market share for earplugs. And so what they did was they brought a suit against Moldex out of California, because Moldex had a competing brand of earplugs that was competing with 3M and Aero Technologies Combat Arms version 2 earplugs. And when I say 3M Aero Technologies, the reason why I'm saying those two companies together is because in 2007 3M bought out Aero Technologies. And okay. So Aero Technologies was the company that originally invented that Combat Arms version 2 earplug. So you have Moldex was out there. They were going to start marketing to the military and had started marketing to the military. So 3M filed a lawsuit against Moldex saying, hey, you guys are infringing on our patent. And so I don't know what they were thinking at the time, but it later turned out that, in fact, Moldex wasn't infringing on their patent at all. It almost appeared to be malicious prosecution, and that's, in fact, what Moldex had brought a charge or a claim against 3M, saying, hey, we don't believe we're infringing. In fact, you guys are trying to maliciously prosecute us to keep us from selling our earplugs. And so when that was pending, they started doing some depositions. And during those depositions, that initial lawsuit, they started discovering, hey, wait a minute here, something's not right. When we look at 3M, Aero Technologies Combat Arms earplug, it doesn't look like it was ever tested properly. And what they were alleging is that ANSI standards requires that you meet certain specifications for testing. Well, 3M only tested it on 8 people, even though they were going to sell it later to millions of them to the soldiers. They only tested on 8 people, and it turns out that those 8 people were soldiers. I mean, not soldiers, sorry, they were employees of 3M. So it even looked stranger, like, why not farm it out to an independent lab to test their earplugs and have people that aren't employees of 3M or Aero Technologies, just, so it's sort of an independent test, but they didn't test it independently. They instead ran it through their own lab. When they didn't get the results that they wanted, they stopped the testing. But the allegation is that they certified it as being as meeting the specs that the military wanted. And the military ended up buying them. And so they purchased millions of them from 2003 all the way through to 2015.
Wow.
And those millions got assigned to basically every service member going through basic training in the U.S. Also, if you were in Iraq or Afghanistan, you were also being issued these combat arms earplugs.
So these earplugs are theoretical. I mean, I presume are so that when they're firing their arms, obviously it's incredibly loud. We all see images of people at a range wearing major head gear sets, and obviously you can't do that in combat in the same fashion. So that's pretty stunning. I mean, there were a lot of stories of, if I remember correctly, particularly during the Iraq War, of suppliers of military gear that were cutting corners. Some instances, I think there were stories about Kevlar vests, and so for 12 years, 3M is selling these earplugs based to literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of, I guess hundreds of thousands of combat, of people who are either in combat or in training, which presumably is just as problematic.
Correct.
Having tested it on 8 people, 8 employees. So in what circumstances were these tests? Just like out in the backyard of the 3M plant?
And that's what we don't know yet, Sam. We don't know if it was done in sort of a room in one of the offices at 3M or Aero Technologies. We simply don't know. And the reason why we don't know is that all the documents in that initial litigation have been sealed. And so we have just got bits and pieces. And so, but what we do know, however, and there's no mistake about it, is that 3M ended up paying $9.1 million to settle that key TAM action.
Okay, and so who is the plaintiffs in this situation? Like, who are your clients?
The plaintiffs are service members who served in the military in various branches between 2003 and 2015 and actually used the Combat Arms version 2 earplug. And you might think, well, how would they honestly know what earplug they were using? Well, the earplug itself is such a unique looking earplug that it's really unmistakable. It's the only earplug that's double-ended, dual-ended. One half of the earplug is yellow. The other half is olive green. Some people describe it as black, but it's actually an olive green color. And it's very short. And it's made for, you stick the yellow end in. If you were going to basically be out on patrol and you want to hear someone sneaking up behind you, that's the end with the little hole that runs down the center. Or you stick the green end in if you're, let's say, being transported in a helicopter to a different part of the desert. And so, because that end is what they call steady state, so it's going to protect against that constant noise, or it's supposed to protect against that constant noise. But what we see statistically is that during that same period of time, the number of service members that have got hearing loss or tinnitus has just escalated astronomically, right?
And tinnitus is when you have like a ringing in your ear, right?
Yeah, if you think about it in the old days where you would listen to a record and after the song stopped playing, you'd make that sort of scratchy noise. And that's that sort of ringing or scratchy noise that just doesn't stop.
Is it tinnitus or tinnitus?
Well, and that's a good question because I think the actual pronunciation is tinnitus, but almost universally people pronounce it as tinnitus, right? So we use it interchangeably.
And if this is all sealed, how did, tell me the process of what happens here. So you get wind that there's a key TAM case. You don't know the details. but you see the broad outlines.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Sam, because in July 2018, the Department of Justice, they issue a press release, and the press release was, about a page and a half, and it really outlined sort of the overall gist of, hey, you know what? We intervened in this case. We're going to protect our military service members. This shouldn't be happening. And they basically listed all the allegations that we're now pursuing. And as a result of that, the government had 3M pay $9.1 million. So
that doesn't seem like very much, to be honest with you. I mean, how much money did they make off of these?
It is not very much, and we see that over and over.
Do you know how much?
I honestly don't, because Sam, we haven't been able to get the documents yet. We have to go through the whole legal process, get into discovery. We're going to ask to see all of those things, and then we'll have a better idea later on.
I got to imagine a contract to provide those amount of earplugs for 15 years has got to dwarf $9 million. I mean, it sounds to me like this is just like the cost of doing business for them. I mean, it just sounds like it's part of their overhead.
Yeah, and in fact, it probably did. It'll be really interesting when we see how much they did make selling these defective or allegedly defective earplugs to the military. And but it's also equally interesting to me to see how many of our service members actually still have these Combat Arms version 2 earplugs just stuffed away in their possessions at home. And so they've been bringing them into us to say, yeah, these are the ones I wore. And because at the time, the military, they issued a little plastic box, and the little plastic box attached to your sort of lapel on your shirt, and it was meant to put your earplugs in when you weren't using them, right? So they're always available to you, and that basically kept them together, and it's working out.
Do you know how many military potential clients there are? I mean, do you have a sense of what the numbers are of military personnel who are using these devices ostensibly to protect their ears? And
well, we think the potential pool could be up to 1.5 million service members. It's a lot of people, because when you think about it, there were a lot of troops placed in Iraq and Afghanistan during that period of time, and there was a big surge. And so all those service members over there and back in our own country were all issued these earplugs.
Wow. So what are the next steps? You're going through the documents, you're trying to establish some of these facts.
Yeah.
How do you access those documents that have been sealed in a case like this key tam case?
Well, this past week, the latest news was that the JPML, the sort of panel of federal judges that decide where the litigation, this mass tort litigation, is going to be situated, they chose Pensacola, Florida, the home of Levin Papantonio, our firm. And so
that's going to make you pretty happy. You're not going to be traveling so much.
It makes us very happy. We've got a great judge, Judge Rogers, and so, but the MDL just got formed, so we are going to have,
MDL is the multi-district litigation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically, it's not just going to be our firm, it's going to be many firms working together to pursue this case on behalf of the American service members.
We just explained the dynamics of a multi-district litigation. It just basically means that the case that you're bringing in, and this is a federal case out at a federal court.
Correct.
In Pensacola, there may be cases in Pennsylvania, there may be cases in Ohio, in probably every state in the country, and they're just going to be rolled up into this one case.
Yeah, and they do that for judicial efficiency, because as you can imagine, if there were 100,000 cases all over the United States, and each judge in those cases had to decide the same issues, you might as well have one judge deciding the issues for everybody's case, regardless of where in the U.S. they're situated. So they group them together in what's called an MDL, and basically a leadership group will be formed from all the different plaintiffs' attorneys, and the judge will pick who's in that leadership group. And it'll obviously be very seasoned attorneys that have done this many, many times. And as the litigation progresses, we will go through the discovery stage that we were talking about earlier, where we'll get to take depositions. And we will at some point ask to see those documents that are currently sealed in that other litigation.
Well, Troy Boyd, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And is there a site? I mean, if there are vets listening, or I guess active service, I mean, we're talking 2015.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in the case, they can always look at our site for Levin Papantonio, which is levinlaw.com, and we have one of the web pages on there deals with this litigation.
Troy, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Sam. Thank you.
All right, folks. I think we're probably going to take a break and head into the fun half. Obviously, quite a mix of what we had today. Tomorrow on the program, don't know. Basically what I do is I go out and talk to different attorneys and see what cases might have, some broader policy implications, or give a better understanding of the corporate mindset. I mean, the idea that we could have a private rating agency that would rate the quality of earplugs that 3M is presenting, or that, hey, look, U.S. government should learn their lesson 15 years later not to buy the earplugs from 3M. I mean, one of the things, the things that, the reason why I keep coming back to this conference is not merely to lose money at the blackjack table or at the craps table, but it is because you can see the depths of corporate malfeasance here. These are the people who professionally expose it, dig through it. Every time I talk to an attorney here, the idea that we need severe regulation on corporations in a myriad of ways is reinforced. Also, the function that these lawyers play in our society is when you are in, and frankly, it's during the Obama administration, obviously was much better on this than the Trump administration, but still highly problematic. When you're in an era where there is a sense that we need to deregulate corporations, these trial lawyers end up being a second sort of order bulwark against the deregulation, and they also, in many respects, they function as a sort of like a deputized posse, and you see this administration, has packed the courts with right-wingers. They're going to do so more. The implications of that directly impact individuals' ability to someone just came over in the middle of the broadcast to take the coffees away. The ability of people to go to courts and get redress against corporations. So I think we're going to have an opportunity to talk to more people about that tomorrow, and some other specific cases we'll be looking around for. But obviously a big news day too. So we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half, talk about the news, and maybe update on how I'm doing at my lack of luck at the table.